bakers, today on Cooking with the Iron Maiden I'm going to show you how to make a wacky cake. It's a chocolate cake. You might have seen the recipe on the internet lately. It was popular back in the Depression and World War II. It does not have any eggs, nor does it have any milk nor butter in the recipe, so it's good when you don't have a lot of supplies on hand. So we're going to start by turning our oven on to 350 degrees. Now the recipe says to use an ungreased pan. I found it did not come out of the pan very well, so I like to grease in flour, or actually I use the pan baking spray. You want to make sure you get the one with the flour in it though, to grease your pan with. The recipe calls for an 8-inch square pan. You could also use a 9-inch round. I'll be using actually a No. 7 cast iron skillet here today. You could also probably get away with a No. 8. It would make it a little bit of a thinner cake, but not too thin. So a No. 7 or No. 8 cast iron skillet would be good. Our ingredients are pretty simple. We've got a cup of sugar, a cup and a half of flour, and I've already put the flour in my mixing bowl here. Remember always when you scoop your flour to scoop it or stir it up a little bit. If it's packed down, you'll end up with too much flour in your recipe. I've got 3 tablespoons of cocoa powder, a ½ teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon each of baking powder and baking soda, and those are all the dry ingredients. And then you'll also be using a 1/3 cup of vegetable oil. You can use whatever vegetable oil you have, but no butter needed in this recipe. A tablespoon of vinegar. I prefer the white vinegar. It's got a little less flavor to it, but if all you've got is cider vinegars, that's fine. I would not recommend balsamic vinegar. You'll also use a teaspoon of vanilla and 1 cup of warm water. Just warm. It shouldn't feel hot, it shouldn't feel cold, just warm on your hand. So we're going to start by mixing all of our dry ingredients. I like to mix it in a bowl and then pour it in the pan. I think it works a little better. So like I said, I've already got my flour in there. We're going to add the sugar, cocoa powder, salt, teaspoon of baking powder, and a teaspoon of baking soda. And you're just going to take a minute. I just use a whisk here and just stir the ingredients up until everything is blended. You could do this in a mixer, but it's so simple to mix it's really not necessary. So just stir for a second until you get those lumps of cocoa blended in there. And then once you've got it stirred up, we're going to take and we're going to make 3 wells. A real big one and then 2 a little smaller. So now what we do is we're going to pour the oil into the first one. We're going to pour the vinegar into one of them. And we're going to add our teaspoon of vanilla into the 3rd one. Then we're going to take and we're going to pour the warm water over everything. Now it is going to start to fizz a little. You've got the warm water and the vinegar in there, which are going to be reacting with your baking powder and baking soda. So we're just going to give this a quick stir, get everything blended. Don't need to overmix the dough. And we're going to pour this into, just like to give a stir or two, make sure everything is good from the bottom. We're just going to pour this into our pan that we've already prepared. And as you can see, that took no time whatsoever to mix up. Just want to get everything out. And we're going to pop this in the oven. Like I said, I already preheated the oven to 350. So we'll put him in on the middle shelf. And I'm going to set my timer for 30 minutes. And I'll see you back here in about 30 minutes. to tell if the cake is done, you can put a toothpick in the center and it comes out clean. Okay, the timer is going off, so let's go ahead and check our cake. It's starting to come away from the edges, so that looks good. So I'm just going to poke a toothpick in the center here, and the toothpick looks pretty clean to me. So we can go ahead and take our cake out of the oven. And I'm just going to set it off to the side. I'm going to leave it in the pan, and I'm going to let it cool 5 or 10 minutes in the pan. The cake is still very tender when it first comes from the oven. If you turn it out too quickly, sometimes it can get a little misshapen. So we're going to let it set about 5 or 10 minutes in the pan. We'll turn it out, we'll let it cool completely, and then we'll ice it with a fudge icing, and I'll show you how to make the fudge icing in a few minutes. Alright, it's been actually probably almost 10 minutes here, so I'm going to take my cake, and I'm just going to run a knife quickly around the edge here, just to make sure it's nice and loose. It looks good. And I'm going to turn this out onto my cake plate. You could put it on a regular plate, whatever you want here. And, oh, that's okay. We can fix that. We'll just put him right back in there. And no one will ever know once we ice it. Okay, so our cake is ready. I'm just going to let this finish cooling. And once it's completely cool, I'll go ahead and put my chocolate fudge icing on it. And I'll show you how to make that fudge icing once this is cool. See you back here shortly. Alright, our cake has cooled down. So I'm about ready to ice it. So I'm going to make a fudge icing here today. Fudge icing is real simple. It's 1 cup of sugar, regular granulated sugar, a 1/4 cup of cocoa powder, a 1/4 cup or 1/2 stick of butter, and a 1/4 cup of milk, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. I've also got about 1/3 cup of powdered sugar here that I'm going to use to add a little decoration with after we ice the cake. So I'm going to dump my powdered cocoa into my sugar. I already had my sugar in my saucepan there. And I'm just going to give that a quick stir just to mix it up a little bit. It makes it a little easier to blend. And I'm going to drop in my butter and my milk. And we're going to put this on the stove and cook it until it comes to a boil. So I've got it on a medium-low heat. You don't want too high of a heat or you might burn it. So I'm just going to stir this until everything is melted and comes to a boil here. It'll take just a couple of minutes. Once it boils, we'll boil it for 1 minute and then we'll let it cool down just a little bit and we'll be ready to ice the cake. It's been just a couple of minutes here and you do want to stir this while you're making it. It's starting to boil, so I'm going to set my timer for 1 minute. And we're going to continue to stir this and let it cook for 1 minute while it boils. And then we'll be ready to, actually we'll let it cool just a little bit and we'll ice our cake. So this only takes maybe, 5 minutes at the most to make up here. And as I said, you do want to stir it while it's cooking so that it doesn't burn. Okay, it's been 1 minute. I'll turn my timer off. I'll turn my burner off. I'll move my icing off of the heat. And I'm actually just going to continue to stir this icing slowly. It doesn't need to be like a vigorous stir. You just want to keep things moving and at a consistent, temperature throughout. And it's pretty thin right now. You can see as how it's dripping. It just like pours off the thing. So I'm going to stir it for another minute or two here while it cools down. You still want it to be pourable, but it should be getting fairly thick when you pour it on the cake. So we'll just stir this for another minute and then we'll come back and I'll show you what that right temperature looks like and we'll pour it onto our cake. Okay, it's starting to thicken. You can see that you can kind of see the lines when I'm moving the whisk around left in it, and it's a little thicker stream that's coming off, but that's still a little thin. If we pour it on the cake right now, it's just going to all run off. So we want to get it just a little bit thicker before we try and pour it. And like I said, just keep stirring it slowly just to kind of keep things moving around and keep the edges or center from cooling at different rates. All right, we are just about there. If you can see, you can definitely see the lines from when I go. They still come back together to smooth, which is what you want. Got a fairly thick stream coming off. And if you look, you can kind of take this and you can make like a figure 8 or a letter in there, and you can kind of see it last a couple of seconds and then sink in. So I think we're about good there. I'm going to take my spatula out, move my cake over here, and we're going to go ahead and pour this on. And you want to be move fairly quickly as you're pouring it on. It will start to firm up or seize on you, and we want this to be nice and smooth. Just use this little bit extra around the edges here where it's not quite covered yet. I almost went a minute too long. It's not quite perfectly smooth on the top now. Just run that around this last edge over here. And now while this is still reasonably soft, just going to get this last little bit, this one edge spot covered. Okay, so while this is still reasonably soft, I'm going to take my powdered sugar here and I'm going to add just a sugar. I should have added some vanilla to that chocolate icing. I forgot to add the vanilla after I finished boiling it. I think it'll still taste okay, but remember you should add the vanilla after the chocolate finishes boiling. I'm going to add just like a half a teaspoon of water in there, just enough to mix this up, and we'll add maybe another half a teaspoon, and I just want to make a thin paste here. And what we're going to do is we're going to pipe a little circle on that cake. Might need to be just a hair thinner, just a couple more drops. Add the water very slowly. It goes real quick from too thick to too thin, and then you'll be adding more powdered sugar. And now to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just using a Ziploc baggie here, and I'm going to take my icing and I'm going to put it down in one corner of the bag. And we'll close our bag and squish it down to that corner. And we don't have a lot, but we're not going to need a lot. Now I'm going to take a pair of scissors, clean scissors, and I'm going to cut just a little tiny snip off the end of that bag there. And that's going to let me pipe a nice line. So I'm going to start at the center here, and I'm just going to make circles going out. Oops. Move off the edge there, we'll fix him up. Now what you want to do is you want to take a toothpick or a knife, and you're going to start at the center and you're going to go out. And my icing is a little too firm because it's not feathering nice. That should be spreading out through there, and then we'll do some innies on these alternate ones. So we do several outs and then the rest go in. And you got your spider web there. Not the best feathering in the world. It works a little better if you're icing. I think my icing firmed up too quickly on me. I should have poured that just a minute before I did on that cake. Anyways, we've got our chocolate cake here. And despite how it looks, let's see how it tastes. So I'm going to go ahead and cut one of these pieces here. Oh, it looks good. Super moist. Very good. Moist, light, tasty, wonderful.
Could you use a little more vanilla?
Could use a little more vanilla in the ice, but actually you really don't notice it. It tastes good. The only thing I'm missing is a glass of milk with it. So I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson. This is your wacky cake with a fudge icing, a little extra decoration with that little vanilla swirl on the top. If so, please like and share. Please subscribe to this channel for more good cooking with the Iron Maiden. Thanks and happy baking.